All right, starting the second study guide for getting my ABO license. This is a part 2 to yesterday. NM, as we discussed yesterday, doesn't just stand for NM, it means nanometers. Learned that from my lovely optometrist yesterday. As a lens moves away from the eye, it becomes more plus, and as the lens moves closer to the eye, it becomes more minus. Diplopia is double vision, like me when I don't wear my glasses. Difficulty with fusion can cause diplopia, or it can cause the brain to turn off one image in an effort to eliminate double vision. This is called suppression. It's a condition. Define index of refraction. That is the degree that light is bent in a given material based on that material's density. How is index of refraction determined? It is the speed of light over the speed through the material. And each time light encounters a different material, refraction happens. What happens when light enters a transparent medium at an oblique angle? Refraction. It changes the angle of the light. What happens when light enters a transparent medium at 90 degrees? It slows down, continues onward. What type of lens converges light? What type of lens converges light? That is a plus lens. And then, of course, the lens that diverges light is a minus lens. What distance is considered infinity and why? 20 feet, because after light leaves its source, it diverges and becomes parallel at 20 feet. When prism changes the direction of light, this is known as diffraction or deviation. What direction does light enter a prism bend? Towards the normal. And the normal is a line drawn at right angles to the material's surface at the ray point of entry. And of course, the larger a prism, the more light it will bend. If a prism is strong enough, light can be separated into different colors. This is dispersion. The reflectance of the material describes the percentage of incident light reflected from a highly polished surface of that material and is calculated from the refractive index of a material. True or false, a prism does not magnify or minify an image. True, prism only shifts and deviates. What is a diopter? That is the measure of a power lens to refract light. And what is an incident ray? The ray coming into the material before it enters. When does the incident ray become the refracted ray? As it enters and leaves the material. And then what 3 things happen when light hits the medium? Refraction, absorption, and reflection. When light enters a prism, shorter wavelengths are bent to a greater degree than longer wavelengths. And then dispersion is when light is broken down into basic colors, creating a rainbow effect. What is the ABBE value? I believe it's pronounced ABI value or nu value. This is the measure of how easily dispersion happens. And ABI values lie between 29 and 60. Do higher or lower ABI values result in the least dispersion and best vision? Higher. This is why high index is typically better visually than polycarbonate. If light passes through the center of a lens, it will neither converge nor diverge. This represents the optical center or axial ray. The transmittance of a lens material describes the amount of light that will pass through the material. It's usually specified for a given wavelength. And then true or false, a prism focuses light. False, a prism is only going to shift it, they're only going to deviate the light, it's not going to focus it. Does a steeple angle of a prism result in more or less deviation? More, because it's a greater angle of deviation. The image appears toward the apex of a prism when looking in, while it's actually towards the base. And then the ABI value of a material is inversely proportional to the chromatic aberration induced as light passes through it. All right, this has been our second unit for going for the ABO license.